I'm Ada. I'm one of your greenhouse gals here at Volante Farms, and today we're going to be talking about repotting. So you just bought a new plant and you want to put it into a new pot, or you have a plant that has been around for a little while and it needs to be repotted. So let's talk about how to do that today. So firstly, when you choose a pot, you want to make sure that you're choosing the right size pot for your plant. You want to make sure that it's no more than 1 to 2 inches bigger than the pot that it's currently in, otherwise you can shock the roots. You also never want to go for a smaller pot than your plant is currently in for the same reason. The best time to repot your plants is in the early spring. However, you can repot them any time of the year as long as your plant has growth. This would also be a great time to fertilize. However, keep in mind that a lot of potting soils do have fertilizer included in them, so make sure that the soil that you're using doesn't have fertilizer in it if you're going to be adding fertilizer to your soil. So you'll know it's time to repot when you see a couple signs. The first one being if you see roots coming out of the drainage holes on your pot, that's a good sign that there's not enough room and your roots are searching for more space. Another sign could be if your plant is starting to be a little too top heavy, it's not staying upright and it's starting to fall over very easily. One last sign is if your plant is starting to dry out a lot quicker than it used to. That's a good sign that the soil in the pot is taking up less space than the roots, and the roots are really taking up that water very quickly. So I keep referring to this as soil, but this is not soil from your garden, so don't use soil from your garden when you're doing potting plants. You want to make sure that you're using a potting soil that is specifically for your plants, and some plants prefer a more specific soil. So for example, African violet and succulents require different things than a lot of your other plants do. So just some things to keep in mind as you're doing this. Another thing to keep in mind is that when you're putting your plants into the pots, it's really important to have good drainage to keep the roots nice and healthy. If you have a pot like this one that doesn't have drainage in it, it's okay. Something that you could do is, if you're crafty like that, you can drill a hole in the bottom. Otherwise, you don't even have to put it in this pot directly. What you can do is you can nest your pot right in there and it looks just as nice. Process of repotting this plant. Now, the first thing you want to do is you have your plant and you have your pot that you're going to be putting it into. When you take the plant out of the pot that it's currently in, if it's a plastic pot like this, you kind of just want to loosen it up by squeezing it gently on the sides. If it's in a ceramic or a terracotta pot, you might need to take a knife and just go around the outside of it to get it looser. Next, you're going to take your plant. I'm going to grab my bin here to capture any dirt that falls off, because this can be pretty messy. I'm going to take my plant, put it on its side, hold it by the roots, and just gently pull it out. Now you can see the roots on here. You can see that they are nice and a yellowish, whitish color. Those are healthy roots. There's some disagreements on whether or not you should break up this root ball when you are repotting your plant. Personally, I prefer not to, as this can be shocking to the roots. But if your plant is completely root bound, which means that you'll see mostly roots and very little soil, then you might want to break it up a little bit just to give those roots a little bit of space to spread out a little bit. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your new pot, add a very thin layer of soil on the bottom, just to get a little bit down in there. You're going to put your pot in. You want it to be pretty close to the top, so you want to kind of get it to the right height. At this point here, I need to add a little bit more in. That looks like a pretty good height. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take my soil and I'm going to fill it in around the plant. It doesn't have to be pretty, it can be pretty messy. It's going to move around a lot, that's fine. And I like to kind of make sure to push it in around the sides, not too harsh, just because you don't want to take out all of the space there, because that's where the water stays. But make sure to push it down so you don't have any big air bubbles in there that are going to show when you water it for the first time. So now that your plant is in here, you want to make sure that your soil is pretty level, especially with where your plant was initially in the old pot. You don't want it to be mounded up a lot higher or a lot lower, otherwise the water can go away from your plant or sit directly on the stems, and that's not good for it. So the last step with repotting is you want to make sure to water it. So we're going to take this plant, we're going to take our watering can, we're just going to make sure that we do a good job watering all of the soil here, getting it all wet. Because one thing about peat moss, which is a major component in this, is in order to take up water, it can't be fully dry. It has to be a little bit damp. So you just want to make sure that you water it thoroughly, get all of that new soil nice and wet. Watch for the water to start to drain out the bottom. And then always make sure to get rid of any excess water you have down at the bottom here. And that's how you repot a plant.